I was working the I was working the checkout at a supermarket in Munich when an American tourist grabbed my arm and asked where the bread was. I pointed to the bakery section we'd just walked past. She looked confused and said, "No, I mean real bread, like Wonder Bread." I told her we don't really sell that here. She stared at me like I'd told her Germany doesn't have electricity. "How do you make sandwiches?" she asked. I held up a fresh pretzel roll. She shook her head. "That's not bread, that's a pastry." Another customer once asked me why all our eggs were sitting out on regular shelves instead of being refrigerated. I explained that eggs in Europe aren't washed the same way, so they keep their protective coating. He interrupted me. "So you're telling me you sell dirty eggs?" I tried to clarify, but he was already walking away, muttering something about food safety standards. My friend who works at a Tesco in London had a woman demand to speak to the manager because the milk was in the regular aisles, not the refrigerated section. She was holding UHT milk, the kind that doesn't need refrigeration until you open it. The manager came over and tried to explain. The woman cut him off. "I know what shelf-stable means, and this is milk. Milk goes in fridges." She put the carton down and left the store. I've heard hundreds of these stories over the years. Americans walking into supermarkets across Europe, Asia, Australia, and losing their minds over the smallest differences. The way products are organized, the sizes of shopping carts, the fact that you have to bag your own groceries in most places. One guy in Stockholm asked an employee why Swedish people hate convenience. The employee asked what he meant. "You make customers do all the work themselves," he said, pointing at the self-bagging area. The employee just blinked at him. But supermarkets are just the beginning. Once Americans step outside grocery stores, the confusion multiplies. Train stations without Starbucks. Hotels that don't understand what ice machine on every floor means. Restaurants where the waiter doesn't come back every 4 minutes to ask if everything is okay. It's like watching someone try to use a map when they've only ever used GPS. Technically, they know what a map is. They just can't make sense of it. These stories come from cashiers, hotel staff, tour guides, bartenders, and random locals who happen to be standing nearby when reality hit an American tourist. Most of them are funny. Some are baffling. All of them are real. A guy working at a Carrefour in Paris told me about an American couple who spent 20 minutes looking for peanut butter. They finally asked for help. He walked them to the international foods aisle. The husband looked at the shelf and said, "This is it? Just 2 brands?" The employee nodded. The wife actually looked sad. "How do you live like this?" she asked. The employee said French people don't really eat peanut butter. The husband looked offended. "What do you put on your toast?" The employee said butter or jam. The husband shook his head. "That's crazy." Another worker in Amsterdam had someone ask where the plastic bags were at checkout. He said they cost 20 cents. The customer's face went red. "You charge for bags?" The worker explained it's standard across Europe to reduce plastic waste. The customer started arguing that this was a scam. In America, bags are free. This is nickeling and dimming. The worker stayed calm and said the customer could bring reusable bags next time. The customer said he was only here for 3 days, and buying reusable bags made no sense. He paid for the plastic bag, but complained the entire time he was packing. My cousin works at a Woolworths in Australia. An American asked her why all the chocolate was in the normal aisles instead of refrigerated. She said Australian chocolate doesn't melt as easily because of different formulations. The customer said that sounded fake. Chocolate melts. That's science. My cousin tried to explain about palm oil and different cocoa processing. The customer interrupted. "So you're telling me Australian chocolate defies physics?" She gave up and just said, "Sure." Someone in a grocery store in Rome told me about a tourist who got upset that there were no breakfast cereals. The employee pointed out a small section with cornflakes and muesli. The tourist said, "Where's the Lucky Charms? Where's the Cinnamon Toast Crunch?" The employee said those brands aren't sold in Italy. The tourist asked what Italian kids eat for breakfast. The The employee said usually biscuits or bread with Nutella, sometimes pastries. The tourist looked horrified. You give your kids cake for breakfast? A cashier in Berlin had someone try to return opened cheese because it tasted wrong. She asked what was wrong with it. He said it was too strong. She asked what kind it was. He showed her the label. It was Limburger. She explained, that's a strong-smelling cheese and it's supposed to taste that way. He said he didn't want strong cheese, he wanted normal cheese. She asked what normal meant to him. He said, like Kraft singles. She had no idea how to respond to that. Another story from Copenhagen. A customer asked why there was no air conditioning in the store. It was April. The temperature outside was 15 degrees Celsius. The employee said they don't need AC because it's not hot. The customer said it felt stuffy. The employee offered to open a window. The customer said that wasn't the same thing. Air conditioning is standard, he said. The employee just walked away. An employee at a market in Brussels had someone ask if they accepted dollars. She said no, only euros. The customer seemed annoyed. Why not? Dollars are universal. She said euros are the currency in Belgium. He pulled out a $50 bill. This is worth more than euros though, right? She said actually the euro is worth more. He didn't believe her. He pulled out his phone and checked the exchange rate right there. His face fell. He put his wallet away and left without buying anything. A woman working in Dublin told me about an American who asked where the Thanksgiving turkeys were. It was November. She said they don't really do Thanksgiving in Ireland. He said, but it's November. She said, Thanksgiving is an American holiday. He looked confused. Wait, other countries don't have Thanksgiving? She confirmed. He stood there processing this for a solid 10 seconds. Then he asked, so what do you do in November? She said, live normally. Someone stocking shelves in Lisbon had a customer ask why all the wine was so cheap. He explained that Portugal produces a lot of wine, so prices are lower. The customer said, but cheap wine means bad wine. The employee said, actually, Portuguese wine is very good. The customer picked up a bottle that cost 4 euros. This would be $20 minimum in the US. The employee said, yes, that's why people like buying wine here. The customer put it back. I don't trust it. A manager at a grocery store in Tokyo told me an American couple asked why everything was so small. The carts, the aisles, the product packages, everything. He explained that Japanese homes are smaller, so people buy less at once and make more frequent trips. The wife said, that sounds exhausting. The husband asked if Japan had Costco. The manager said yes, but it's not as common. The husband said, that explains a lot. A train conductor in Switzerland told me about an American who got angry that his Eurail pass didn't include seat reservations. The conductor explained that the pass covers travel, but some trains require separate seat bookings. The passenger said that made no sense. I already paid for the pass. The conductor said yes, but certain high-speed trains need reservations. The passenger said, in America, a ticket is a ticket. The conductor said, this isn't America. The passenger had to stand in the vestibule for 2 hours because the train was full. My friend who drives a taxi in Barcelona had a passenger ask why they don't just build the city in a grid, like New York. She said Barcelona was built hundreds of years before city grids were common. The passenger said, yeah, but couldn't they fix it now? She asked what he meant by fix. He said, knock things down and rebuild it properly, with right angles. She laughed because she thought he was joking. He wasn't joking. A ticket agent at Heathrow told me someone asked why there was no TSA. She said the UK has its own security system. He said, but TSA is the standard. She said TSA only exists in America. He looked genuinely shocked. So who checks if terrorists are getting on planes? She said UK border force and security staff. He said that sounded disorganized. She assured him it works fine. He still seemed skeptical. Someone working at a train station in Prague had a tourist ask where the Amtrak counter was. He said Amtrak doesn't operate in Europe. She said, then how do people take trains? He said they use European rail companies. She asked how many there were. He said it depends on the country. She said that sounded complicated. He said it's actually pretty simple once you understand it. She bought a bus ticket instead. A parking attendant in Copenhagen told me an American tourist tried to argue that parking meters were illegal. The attendant asked why he thought that. The tourist said, "You can't charge people to park on public streets." The attendant said, "That's exactly how parking meters work." The tourist said in his city parking was free. The attendant said not in Copenhagen. The tourist got a parking ticket later and tried to dispute it at the police station. They told him to pay it. A hotel shuttle driver in Amsterdam had a passenger ask why the van was so small. The driver said it fits the narrow streets. The passenger said, "Why not just widen the streets?" The driver explained that Amsterdam's streets are hundreds of years old and protected. The passenger said, "That seems impractical." The driver said it's part of the city's charm. The passenger said, "Charm doesn't help when you're trying to fit luggage." Someone working at a bus station in Athens told me a tourist asked why all the signs were in Greek. The employee said, "Because we're in Greece." The tourist said, "Yeah, but English is the international language." The employee pointed out that many signs have English translations. The tourist said, "Not enough of them." The employee asked if he was lost. He said no, but it would be easier if everything was in English. The employee just nodded and walked away. A subway worker in Paris had someone complain that the metro didn't have announcements in English. He said some lines do. She said not enough. He said this is France. She said lots of tourists visit. He said tourists can learn basic French words or use maps. She said that was unreasonable. He said learning 5 words isn't unreasonable. She disagreed. They went back and forth for a while. She missed her train. A ferry operator in Istanbul told me a passenger asked why the ferry didn't have Wi-Fi. He said most ferries don't. She said, "It's 2024. He said, "Ferries are for transportation, not internet cafes." She said her phone plan didn't work internationally. He suggested she get a local SIM card. She said she didn't want to deal with that. He said then she'd have to wait until she got to land. She spent the whole ride looking annoyed. Someone working at a rental car agency in Dublin had a customer refuse the car because it was manual transmission. The agent said most cars in Ireland are manual. The customer said he only knew how to drive automatic. The agent said they had one automatic available, but it cost more. The customer asked why. The agent said automatics are less common. The customer said, "That's backwards." The agent said it's actually normal in Europe. The customer paid extra. A train platform attendant in Vienna told me about a tourist who missed his train and demanded they hold it. The attendant said the train had already left. The tourist said, "Can't you call them?" The attendant said no. The tourist said, "In America, they'd hold the train." The attendant said, "This isn't America, and trains run on schedule." The tourist said that was bad customer service. The attendant said being on time is good customer service. The tourist had to wait 40 minutes for the next one. A waiter in Madrid told me an American couple got upset that he didn't bring the check immediately after they finished eating. They had to flag him down. When he brought it, the husband said, "Why didn't you just bring this automatically?" The waiter explained that in Spain, lingering after a meal is normal, and waiters don't rush you. The wife said, "But we're done." The waiter said he had no way of knowing that. The husband said, "We put our forks down." The waiter said lots of people put their forks down and keep talking. They left a bad review online. A bartender in Prague had someone ask for ice water. He brought water without ice. The customer said, "I asked for ice." He said they don't typically add ice to water. She said, "Why not?" He said Europeans don't like drinks super cold. She said, "But I want ice." He said he could add some, but it would cost extra. She looked shocked. "You charge for ice?" He said ice isn't free to make. She said in America ice is always free. He said this isn't America. She drank the water without ice and looked miserable. Someone working at a pharmacy in Germany told me a customer got angry that medications were behind the counter. She asked for ibuprofen. The pharmacist asked what strength. She said 200 milliliters. He asked how many tablets. She said a bottle of 500. He said they don't sell bottles that big. She asked why not. He explained that German regulations limit package sizes. She said that was ridiculous. He said it reduces accidental overdoses. She said, or maybe it's just inconvenient. She bought 2 small packages and left. A hotel receptionist in Stockholm had a guest complain that the room had no AC. It was June. The temperature outside was 18 degrees. She said Swedish hotels don't always have AC because it's rarely needed. He said his room felt warm. She offered to open the window. He said that lets in noise. She said she could bring a fan. He said that wasn't the same. She apologized, but said there was nothing else she could do. He left a 1-star review saying the hotel was primitive. A store clerk in Belgium told me someone tried to return clothes without a receipt. The clerk said they needed proof of purchase. The customer said, "Just look it up in your system." The clerk said they'd need the credit card used. The customer said he paid cash. The clerk said then they couldn't process a return. The customer said, "This would never happen in America." The clerk said Belgian stores have different policies. The customer left the clothes on the counter and walked out. A tour guide in Athens had someone ask why restaurants didn't open for dinner until 8 p.m. She explained that Greeks eat late. The tourist said, "But I'm hungry now." It was 5:30. She suggested a cafe. He said he wanted a proper meal. She said he'd have to wait or find a tourist restaurant. He asked why Greeks eat so late. She said it's cultural. He said it seemed impractical. She said it works fine for Greeks. He ate at McDonald's. Someone working at a gym in Copenhagen told me an American visitor asked why there were no paper towels in the locker room. The employee said they use hand dryers to reduce waste. The visitor said, "What about wiping down equipment?" The employee pointed to reusable cloths and spray bottles. The visitor said, "You reuse them?" The employee said yes, they're washed daily. The visitor looked disgusted. "That's unsanitary." The employee said it's actually more environmentally friendly. The visitor didn't renew his day pass. A librarian in Dublin had someone complain that the library was too quiet. She said libraries are supposed to be quiet. He said, "American libraries have talking sections." She said this library has one small area for group work, but most of it is silent. He said that felt oppressive. She said it helps people concentrate. He said he concentrated better with background noise. She suggested he study at a cafe. He said cafes cost money. She said the library is free but has rules. He left after 10 minutes. A cashier in Oslo told me a customer got upset that stores close at 6 p.m. on weekdays. The customer said, "How do people shop after work?" The cashier said Norwegians shop on weekends or during lunch breaks. The customer said that was inconvenient. The cashier said Norwegian labor laws protect workers' time. The customer said, "What about customer convenience?" The cashier said stores balance both. The customer said in America stores stay open late. The cashier said Norway isn't America. The customer left empty-handed. A museum guide in Florence had a visitor ask why the museum didn't have a cafe. She said it's a historic building with restrictions. He said, "Every museum should have a cafe." She said some do, but not this one. He asked where he could get coffee. She pointed to a bar across the street. He said he didn't want to leave the museum. She said the museum doesn't allow food or drinks inside anyway. He said that was inconvenient. She said it protects the art. He snuck in a granola bar and got caught by security. I was standing in line at a post office in Vienna when I heard an American ask the clerk why shipping to the US was so expensive. The clerk explained international shipping rates. The customer said, "But it's just a postcard." The clerk said the price is based on destination, not item size. The customer said in America, domestic shipping is cheap. The clerk said this is international. The customer paid but kept shaking his head. The woman behind me whispered, Does he think Austria is a US state? I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. That's the thing about these stories. They keep happening every day in every country. Americans walking into situations expecting everything to work the way it does back home. Getting confused when it doesn't. Sometimes getting angry. Sometimes just baffled. But always assuming their way is the default, and everywhere else is doing it wrong. It's not malicious. Most of these people aren't trying to be difficult. They're just genuinely surprised that other places have other systems, that other countries developed their own solutions to problems. That normal isn't universal, it's cultural. A plastic bag tax makes sense when you grow up with environmental awareness campaigns. Eating dinner at 9 p.m. makes sense when your culture values long social meals. Trains that run exactly on time make sense when your infrastructure is designed around punctuality. The confusion goes both ways sometimes. Europeans visit America and can't believe the portion sizes or the amount of ice in drinks, or the fact that tax isn't included in prices. Australians find American coffee baffling. Japanese tourists get overwhelmed by how loud Americans are in public. Everyone thinks their normal is the normal until they travel. But there's something specific about watching Americans abroad struggle with the basics. Maybe it's because American culture is so dominant globally that Americans don't expect to be the outsiders. Or maybe it's because the US is so big that many Americans never leave and don't realize how different things can be. Either way, the pattern is consistent. The surprised faces, the but why questions, the certainty that their way makes more sense. My favorite part is when they finally get it. When the confusion shifts to understanding. When they realize that different isn't wrong, it's just different. That happens sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. And when it does, you can see them start to actually enjoy the experience instead of fighting it. Until then, I'll keep collecting these stories, from cashiers and waiters and train conductors and hotel workers, from locals who witness the confusion firsthand. Because these moments are everywhere, in every supermarket aisle, at every ticket counter, in every restaurant where someone asks for ranch dressing and gets a blank stare. The stories never stop coming. And honestly,